All right, good morning, grade 7 and 8s. This is our first lesson of the week. Our first booklet we are covering is Introduction to Coordinate Systems. Now, we have covered this in the past in various ways, but this is our one time to really dig deep and be specific about the coordinate systems. This is something that's going to come back for grade 9, grade 8s. So we want to make sure that we have a strong foundation. Our first booklet really is just getting used to the idea of the X and Y axes and putting, or as we would say, plotting a point on a grid or a Cartesian plane. And this is something that is used for statistics and probability, algebra, even most video games are using this kind of math behind the scenes. So we need to make sure that we understand it. So first things first, you may have been familiar with something that is only one square with a big thick line, and we would call that a chart, we would call that a graph, and this is what we have here as a complete version of that graph. Now, when I refer to this, the mathematical term for a graph that has two full lines, one vertical and one horizontal, is called the Cartesian plane. So if I ever say Cartesian plane, I just mean a full-on graph. As you can see, because of these thick black lines going through the middle vertically and horizontally, we have 4 quadrants. So first things first, we got to talk about these lines. These lines are called axes, and one line is called an axis. The horizontal line is always known as the x-axis, and the vertical line is always known as the y-axis. There's no exception to this. When I have an x-axis and I have these two lines to indicate where the axis is, the exact center here is 0. So if this is 0, then going up is 1 and 2 and so on and so forth. And going right on the x-axis would give me 1, 2, etc. So that is how you are familiar with it thus far. This is something you did even as far back as grade 1, 2 with the help of a teacher. You had your y-axis, you had your x-axis. When it went to the right, it would go higher, higher, higher. When it went up, it went higher, higher, higher. 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. With a full Cartesian plane, you can see that I also have this stretch below the x-axis and this stretch to the left of the y-axis. Well, if this is 0 for both, and this is 1 and 2 on the x-axis, then to go the opposite direction means that we have -1 and -2. Pardon my printing. And that is how we have to visualize the graph. Likewise, if going up vertically along the y-axis goes from 0 to 1 to 2, then to go below the x-axis makes it -1, -2, so on and so forth. Because of the just size of my chart right now, I'm not really able to do a lot of neat printing for numbers, but you can see that we have our quadrants, and you can see where our x-axis and y-axis is, as well as where things are along each axis. When we go to the left or below the middle, then we are using negative numbers. All right, now when it comes to plotting, we are going to treat each of these individual lighter lines as one increment past the axis. So like I said, this first line here is 1 on the x, then 2, and 3, and so on, and then y, up, up, up we go, 1, 2, 3. Now if I put a dot somewhere, let's say I put a dot here at the intersection, and I always want to put a dot at the intersection, I can tell you where that dot is on my graph. I don't just go, oh, it's a little bit up and it's a little bit to the side. I can specifically say that it is 2 to the right and 2 up, meaning that my coordinates are 2, 2, 2 to the right, 2 up. And you've done this before when you play Battleship. They use numbers and letters combined, A2, J10, so on and so forth, but you're using coordinates on a Cartesian plane to do Battleship. However, there is a rule. This is not just my rule, this is a rule for math and plotting things on a Cartesian plane using coordinates. You must always use the x-axis coordinate first when you are doing a pair. When I do this, I'm calling it a coordinate or a coordinate pair, and the first number must always, that was a really bad circle, sorry, must always be the x coordinate. All right, so I'm going to plot another one. Let's say here. So try it your own. We're going to do some Dora the Explorer. What is the coordinate for that point? Okay, if I do the x-axis, my first coordinate is 4, then a comma, and I am 2 above the x-axis. Sweet. That is my coordinate. It is not 2, 4. That is not the case whatsoever. It must always be 4, 2. The last thing that we're going to do for this lesson is start playing with the negative quadrants. So let's say I have this. Even though the x-axis value is less than 0, it's a negative number because we're behind the y-axis, we still put the x-axis first, or the x value first. In this case, it is negative 3, 2. It's 3 behind, 2 above. If I put 1 here, I have negative 5, negative 1, because now I'm below the x-axis. I always put the x first, then I put the y. I use my 0, and remember that going up is positive, going down is negative, going right is positive, going left is negative. To that end, I can plot out and tell you where any point on a Cartesian plane is. That's going to be our lesson for today. I will be doing another lesson tomorrow on translations because I think this booklet's going to be rather short. If you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send an email. Make sure you're attending your daily meetings. We are doing lots of work in our meetings, and I look forward to seeing you later this morning. Have a great day.